Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Practical Solutions series. This session is the second in the series and focuses on inclusion and universal design for learning, more commonly known as UDL. My name is Brooke Lilo, and I am the current president of the Pennsylvania chapter of the Council for Exceptional Children, or PACEC. The Practical Solutions series is one result of a year-long collaborative effort between PACEC and the Peel Center to bring special education professionals, families, and self-advocates together to learn and share ideas. The Peel Center and PACEC began collaborating early in 2020 to plan a conference focused on advocating for equity in the field of special education. Recognizing the power of collaboration after a successful conference, the two organizations began planning the Practical Solutions series. If you missed the first session, focused on transition, recordings are available on the Peel and PACEC websites. Additionally, for today, the handout is available for download in the handout panel. It will also be available on the websites. Today's session will focus on practical solutions to promote inclusion and UDL. Let me take a moment to define those terms before we begin. Inclusion is not just offering a seat in the classroom. It's being a valued member of the class. Inclusion means that we ensure that everybody has the same opportunities to participate in every aspect of life. Specific to education, inclusion is the implementation of evidence-based strategies within the context of the mindset that all students bring value to the classroom. The circle at the far right of your screen depicts an inclusive classroom filled with diverse individuals. Shelley Moore wrote about an experience she had when talking about inclusion, saying inclusion means no other. Looking at inclusion as a concept of teaching to the diversity of all, we all have strengths, we all have stretches, and we all need to get better at something. The difference in teaching to diversity, however, is that we don't start with our deficits, we start with our strengths. Inclusive education thrives on the learning and interaction of each person in the community. Universal design for learning provides a framework for inclusive classrooms. By engaging all students, providing multiple representations of the content, and promoting active learning and multiple means of expression, the UDL approach encourages flexibility in teaching, learning, and assessment. This flexibility allows inclusion of the broadest range of learners. One of the handouts that you have explains each of these areas in more detail and provides additional examples. We are so happy that you've joined us for this session. I would now like to introduce the Pennsylvania Bureau of Special Education Director, Carole Clancy, to share her vision for UDL in Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much. Before I begin, I did want to take a moment to acknowledge everyone viewing, regardless of your role, whether you're an educator, a parent, a caretaker, advocate, agency, student. Thank you so very much for your dedication this year, marking the 1-year anniversary this week. We have learned so much and recognize the tenacity and the commitment we have for our students with disabilities across Pennsylvania. What a pleasure it is to speak with you today regarding some challenges of inclusion and a vision for moving forward. If you look into the history of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act on the USDE website, it describes that in 1975, when Public Law 94-142 was passed, it was passed with the intention of supporting 1 million children with disabilities who had been excluded from the educational system and children with disabilities that had limited access. It surfaced the foundational principle of improved access for advancing the education of children with disabilities. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, requires that all students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate public education, and that these students should be educated in their least restrictive environment according to their individualized education program. But as special education services has evolved over the years, I'm not sure that it intended to create a situation where students with disabilities were not participating as members of the whole student body. That surely was never the intent. And almost 50 years later, the concept of inclusion continues to be a strong belief and a law, but sometimes a challenge when put into practice. When I speak to educators and to parents, the challenges lie in the how to authentically design instructional opportunities for students with disabilities to access standards-aligned instruction with their same-age peers. So the challenge of inclusion is not with the concept, but within the preparation of the instruction. When we use the term inclusion, it gives the impression that we're going to add people to an existing group. We are going to include them. But if we approach any system from a universal design lens, we then can be building our schools and the instructional environments, assuming, knowing that students with all different diversities are in the classroom. And as you will hear a bit more later, probably universally designed principles developed out of architecture, which is why there are ramps at every corner of the sidewalk and audio supports at traffic crosswalks. The same principles can be used when designing instruction. If we lean on the principles of UDL as we design our instructional environments, classrooms will be designed with the assumption that all students will be there. And the students that are there will be diverse in many different ways, including they may have disabilities. The educator would plan in a way to support whatever students may enter their classroom door in advance, and only need to make individual tweaks or adjustments based on some individual needs of students, opposed to waiting for them to be scheduled into their class and then making the accommodations. The majority of the work occurs in the planning process. Universal design is a way of thinking and planning about teaching and learning that supports all students to have equal opportunity to success by providing flexibility in the way students access material, engage in the lessons, or demonstrate their understanding. It can require additional training of our professionals, but a change in lens or perspective, the system is beginning with the assumption that students with disabilities will be in the classrooms. We should assume all students will be in the classrooms and plan accordingly. It is most critical that we train our educators to know how to design instruction to support all of the potential students that may enter their room. We certainly have come a long way from the 1970s in practice, but there still is work to do. In closing, we have been in a very challenging situation this year. We have had to overcome some significant barriers to learning. And based on the situation we are in now, I'm curious if what we perceive to be barriers to inclusion before the pandemic, would we really see them as barriers now? And can we project what we learned through this time period to continue to innovate and support students with disabilities to be educated in their least restrictive environment? Can we support our educators to increase their toolbox of ideas to support the many diverse learners that will join their classroom? There are 2 Pennsylvania entities that can currently support teachers and school systems to enhance their UDL practices. The Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network provides training and resources to school districts and teachers, and the intermediate units also have support systems for universal design and planning instruction. This is a priority of the Bureau of Special Education. So there have been grants offered in the past, and you will see additional grants offered to school systems in the future to support school leaders to cause reform within their classrooms if they so choose, and there will be additional training for school leaders on the considerations they may need to know to support this within their school settings. Please know, it's not a magic wand. There is still work that goes into the process, and it requires innovation, tenacity, and commitment. But once the practice is in place, the outcomes can be amazing. I am very eager for you to hear the perspectives of this outstanding panel and their personal examples of the power of UDL. Please listen for the role of the school administrator, the perceptions of parents, and the impact on all students in the classroom. Inclusion is more than just a belief system. It is an active process of planning proactively to support the success of the instructional design to ensure authentic and meaningful learning in a student's least restricted environment. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Carole. Thank you so much for that helpful information and really the guidance related to the challenges and the barriers and also the vision that you have for universal design for learning. We're really grateful for that. And really some of the words that came out was, it's not the if, but it's the how we do it, right? The equal opportunity. And begin with the assumption that all students are in the classroom. Really want to echo some of the words that you said. Really, thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions for Carole, you can always add them into the question pane, and we will be directly sending them to Carole as we move forward. So thank you, Carole, again for all your work.
Thank you.
Sure. Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Lori Baru, and I'm the coordinator at the Peel Center. I'm going to be facilitating the conversation among our panelists today. And just a reminder, if you can put your question into the question pane. I know Kala and Brooke and I think Janine are actually working that pane, so they'll be monitoring the information. And we're really going to talk to the panelists and have a conversation, but there may be times that a timely question may be asked, and or we also may wait till the end of the presentation, or we may answer some of the questions privately, if that works. So I'm really excited today. We have three families who are family leaders to Families to the Max, and we're going to place some more information about Families to the Max in the chat box or in the question box so people can have that. And you can also request more information about Families to the Max at the end of this presentation on the slide on the handout that you have. These parents, I have to say, have really gone beyond helping and guiding and continuing to teach all of us having meaningful participation and access to their children. And that also includes what I'd like to say is Todd McMillan, who is the coordinator of student services at Greensburg-Salem School District. And I think, Todd, that's just outside of Pittsburgh, right? Thank you for joining us. And I'd like to say Nicole Gilchrist is here with us today, and she's a parent of her daughter, who is Abby, who is 8 years old, who we've gotten to know pretty well through the years. Thank you, Nicole, for being here. Jill Housel is also here. She is a parent of Anna, who is 20 years old. And Jill has really guided us as well, and we've learned a lot from her experiences of going through the school system with her daughter, Anna. And I know we have Anita is also on. Anita Nair, can you, let's see if we can undo your mic. There you go. Oh. If we can introduce Anita Nair is also a parent of Ishan, who is age 15. And Anita brings a lot of experience herself about inclusion. So welcome, panelists. I really just wanted to start. I know you heard, from Carole Clancy, and you've been thinking about being on the panel today. Is there anything that you wanted to start with, that you wanted to convey to the participants today, right off?
This is Jill. I think the one thing that really stood out to me, what Carole had to say was, like Lori also reiterated, is the how. It's the work that goes behind figuring out the how. But however, knowing that it is very possible, and with that working together, that the universal design for learning does allow access for all children to participate and show what they know, and that's a great thing. It's very inspiring to see that happen.
I think a lot of consideration is going into this. Is it is like Jill said, it is a challenge, and it really does take a lot of planning, collaboration with IEP team members, including parents in that IEP team. They know what works well for their children, and using the tools that are available, using technology. But you don't always have to recreate everything, but just keeping that in mind is how can we find entry points into pieces of curriculum to help engage all students.
Hmm.
I guess I would agree. I guess I would agree with all of those, and say from our experience too, I think from what the information that Carole shared, what we've seen is a district and a team that's very supportive and believes in the idea of inclusion, but to her point of the how. So I think what we've seen is struggle without using the principles of UDL. What happens is we have an extremely dedicated special ed teacher, co-teacher, who just can be buried in making modifications and accommodations without using the principles of UDL. So when you're not using it, you could have teams who are so dedicated to the idea of inclusion, but it can become really burdensome to try to accommodate or modify every single lesson. So I think UDL, in our experience, is necessary, and I don't envision us having real inclusion for my daughter until we get a firm grasp on how to incorporate UDL in our school. So I'm excited for all the initiatives that we're hearing about.
I think,
Go ahead.
yeah, we started with our school district. We had a lot of support and collaboration, but none of us knew the how piece. We just wanted kind of Ishan to do whatever his peers were doing. So as we went along, I think every year we designed, what tools would be helpful, and we built everything to his strengths. So I think every year was, a learning experience for the school as well as us as parents. We would know what works for Ishan. And I think without hesitation, I think they did try out everything we would suggest. They came up with things, and I think every year when we see him making progress with technology and all the other stuff which we tried, it has worked out well for us.
Thanks, Anita. We heard technology a lot, and Todd, I know we talked a little bit about that in our pre-planning. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that makes a difference when you're planning for a student? I know you talk sometimes about, like the how and making sure that staff is aware also, like some of the staff that you have, and making sure how they're aware of making these UDL decisions as well.
Yeah, I think that the using the tools that are available, I think that's the key, and showing the staff that are working with children the benefits of certain things and how those can benefit the teacher too, and adults. And I think a good example of that, as Carole said, UDL came out of architecture, out of universal design, building structures. And when we look at that, you know, one of the big keys where this came from is other people benefit and will utilize some of the things that exist that are designed in buildings. So the same thing with the learning. So if you design it with that end in mind, with you know, how can this benefit everyone, that's your foundation. Like Nicole said, is you're not rushing around just trying to make all these individual accommodations. A lot of that can be met, not everything, but in your planning it can come down to the end where there's some tweaks and what you have to do for individuals. But looking at things in technology like Microsoft Office, that's the platform we use in our school district. And you know, one of the best things is there's so many tools, accessibility tools that Microsoft, and there are in Google too, but Microsoft I'm more familiar with, that are applications that you can download and utilize. You know, one of the things that we have utilized that has really helped a lot is the ease of use of the tools in Microsoft Office. I'm going to use Immersive Reader as an example. You know, it allows you to very easily take a piece of text that's been shared and it can read it to you. You can change the voice to speed, the backgrounds, negative space. You can have it read, you can have it identify different parts of speech. It will read it in different languages. There's just so many free tools that are there that and I look at it as teaching children to utilize and access those tools. So they're learning to do that and be more independent. And it's different for every age level, but it's shocking what kids can do with technology that we can't. So I think when we have those opportunities is using those, making them available to everybody. I know sometimes I use the Immersive Reader just to have it read something to me because I've read it 4 or 5 times and you know, my head's just not in it at that moment, or you know, my eyes are tired. You know, I don't have my reading glasses with me, so at that point, I might be utilizing some of the different colored backgrounds, or you can change the font size and everything. You don't have to go through all the steps. They're available in one small toolbar, and you know, there's a lot of tools like that out there. And I think that we can, the more we can share those types of tools and think about that in our planning on how we're utilizing those, not just with children with special needs, but making them available to everybody. We really found once kids know those tools, adults too, is you'll see them going to that as a preference, or that's more of a desired learning style for them. So I think those are great things we have to consider in our design, and that's just one example.
Thanks, Todd. Anybody else? I guess I'm just wondering, what are some of the tools, Nicole, that Abby, you and the team have used that make her to have more access?
Right. So Abby has a disorder, so she cannot use her voice to speak. So she uses a communication device to talk. So we use a lot of tools. So she, we call her Talker. She uses a talker to communicate. We send in an extra talker for her friends to use. So we started doing that in preschool and continued it up until you know, pre-COVID when she was still in school. And we've actually heard that that has been a useful tool. I mean, so at her age, I mean, you know, for kids are still in that emergent literacy, you know, time period, a communication device, you know, has a symbol and a word. So, so we heard both in kindergarten and in first grade how, I guess the teachers were surprised. I guess I wasn't, because, you know, I had read so much about communication devices but the teachers noted both years that the talker had helped some kids who were having a little more difficulty with learning to read. So it helps with sight words. It you can type on it, so it has, you know, like a keyboard, so it helps with sort of sounding words out to search for the words. And in addition to that, we use we have an iPad full of tools. So she just started using actually a speaking calculator this year, which is like a great tool for her. So so one of the, you know, specific things that helps in math is that this year, she's in 2nd grade, so kids are learning to add right now 2- and 3-digit numbers. So Abby's not really at that point yet. So we're still, doing just the number recognition as she's keying the numbers in, but she gets that audio feedback, number recognition, and can add it with that. So that's a great tool. We also use the readers. And then this is something, I guess it still works as a tool, but it definitely fits into the UDL framework. A technique that we found so helpful that we've been using a lot this last year in COVID is like shared reading. And then we have an app where we make a book that Abby can read on her own. So what that looks like is kids come in with different background knowledge. So an example that we've done so far in 2nd grade is they did mealworms in the beginning of the year, and then they did penguins. And so when they started out the chapters for both of those things, the teacher let kids volunteer if they wanted to share what they knew about those things. So, and I wrote down with a couple examples just to be more specific. So when they did this shared writing, Abby just said, and I had read a book with her before, even though, she knows what penguins are, but Abby's contribution was penguins swim. and then another student said penguins don't fly. And then some other students were a lot more descriptive and had more complex things. So one said penguins in the water are called a raft. And actually I didn't know that. So you see there's like all levels, but then the tool that we used is the teacher sent me that information. She put that on her Google Slides. And then I was able to put it in. The app that we use is Pictello. So it's an app where you can make little books. And so I put all of the kids' information that they shared. Penguins do this, penguins don't do this. And Abby has a book that reads it to her. And that was interesting. It was especially interesting to her because I included the name of the student who said it. And that's like, anything with her friends is instantly more interesting than without. So we use apps like Pictello where we can quickly make a book. I actually have it on my phone too, so you can actually quickly make it on your phone with home pictures. Sorry, I'm talking too much, but we have a ton, so we use a lot of apps that involve ways that she can review information on her own too. And apps that we can personalize, like customize things, are always more interesting to her.
Very nice. Maybe it might be nice to have some of those apps that we can share with the group. If you send them forward, we can do that. That would be great, Nicole. That'd be great. And I know, Anita, you also used a lot of apps as well. I know for Ishan. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Ishan, when he was little, before they had one-on-one laptops, and we were, trying to come up with how he could read. So Bookshare was one of the things we used to read books from, but we used the Voice Dream app, which would help him to read the books, and it would highlight. So he would pick up reading and writing notes and other things on the Voice Dream app. So that was one thing we used. And he used to struggle a lot with writing with a pencil. That was not a preferred method to use a pencil and paper. So one of the apps which we used a lot was Claro PDF. It would just, initially we used SnapType, but then Claro had many more features where we could add visuals, we could add videos, we could, he could annotate and do a lot of things on Claro. So that was something he would write his book reports, and any assignment he would be given. That was one thing we really used. And mainly as he started getting into middle school, the phone, simple phone, he would just use the phone for, like, he has a working memory issue to remember things. He would just make sentences, and before he could even write it on a paper or on the iPad or the computer, he would forget. So he would just record it on his phone and just, scribe it from there. The speech therapist is another thing, like they would want him to be pulled out to do speech, and we always wanted it in natural environments. So we kind of came up with a lot of ways for him to do speech with his friends and peers in the natural environment. One of the things that we used, and he used a simple phone again, he would interview his teachers. He was part of the newspaper club. And so his speech therapist would give him questions to ask the teachers, and he would just read it out, and he would record the entire interview on the phone, and then he would scribe it later, either on Claro or something like that. And the other thing, he would just be part of the morning announcements on TV. He loves to perform in front of people. You know that, Lori. He has. So he would do morning announcements on TV, and he would do his best. So that is something we felt that was working very well for him. Class speeches or whatever, everything was recorded on his phone for him to remember. So I think the phone really is used a lot by him, and every other kid his age is using the phone for a variety of things. And like Todd said, we use Microsoft as well. So, you know, Immersive Reader now is being used a lot. One of the apps which we really used is Blend Space. I don't know whether any of you. So it's got any topic you have, you just kind of search on that, and they have videos or assignments or whatever. So everything is designed for him on that one page, and he would just independently kind of work on each assignment on his own without like too much support from the aide. So that was another thing we were trying to get the support of the aide as much as possible. I mean, that's all comes to mind. Phone timer, yeah. When he was in middle school, he would always get late to get to a different class. And so he used a simple phone timer, like one of the timers which we use, which worked wonderful, was push press workout timer. It was just a simple workout timer, but it was a visual timer, and he would just hold his phone and just get to the other class, and he never got late after that. So I think technology, little ways, has helped him a lot.
I know that he did use that a lot. I recall you saying that. Thanks, Anita, for that. I guess, and I'm thinking of Jill. I know, Jill, you had said for Anna that in the beginning, I don't think you used a lot of UDL. It actually became an epiphany for you at one point. Can you share what you meant by that and tell us what you mean?
Yeah, UDL in our situation emerged over time. I think part of it was technology, you know, so Anna's 20, so 15 years ago, things were a lot different, right? So we didn't have a lot of technology back then. However, as she got older, they incorporated the iPad for, so she could use the Keeble keyboard so that it was larger, so she could type easier. Word prediction is really helpful to her because spelling is a difficulty. But the UDL part of it, which really wasn't high tech at all, really, was just adding pictures into vocabulary. So instead of the worksheets that they would typically give a child that, you know, would have the word and a definition, and particularly as you get older, there was no pictures where, so for her access was the picture. So she was responsible for, you know, doing the picture to the word. Her paraprofessional could read her the word if she could not read the word herself, but actually she learned words much faster when pictures were given. So her reading improved tremendously just from the pictures. But when teachers started incorporating, so now we're in high school now, incorporating the pictures into the instruction they were giving all children, all students, they found that the other students were greatly benefiting from those pictures because they might have been visual learners versus, or if they were struggling readers with whatever reason, but it allowed a lot of other students to remember words and what they meant at a faster pace, and not just kids with IEPs. I also, for technology, she, and actually it was interesting. Anita's the one who pointed this out. So this is like a simple thing, and we've been doing this with Anna now. She has, she's hard to understand, so her speech articulation can be an issue. And we've been working on that for a while, but Anita had pointed out, you know, we use Alexa, and so Ishan's speech got better because he's speaking more clearly, so Alexa will understand him. Well, Anna's been doing the same thing relatively recently, and Mom, you tell Google, we have Google, so it's hey Google, right? So it's a matter of teaching, you know, hey Google, it's the inflection it catches. You gotta get, you know, it's those simple things that you don't even think that technology can do. And so her speech, she's learning to slow down, which is all the strategies her speech pathologists are telling her at school. Slow down, you know, open your mouth, move your mouth more. So all these things she can practice at home and or at school, you know, all these different environments. And that's, I think, another thing that's really important about the universal design. These are things that can be used at home and at school. A lot of these things. It's not just here and not there or one or the other. And I think the benefit of collaborating and sharing what's been working and what you've been trying and how those things can be tweaked at school if they don't have, you know, Anna's used Bookshare, which isn't really technology, but it's an app. And a lot of schools have Bookshare. So she used that for her access for reading. More recent, in the last, I don't know, 5 years, she's used Bookshare. And then, you know, in the classroom, they would get a graphic novel instead of having her read the Old English Shakespeare or whatever, you know, so she still had that access point. So some things weren't quite technology, but they were definitely universal design and gave her access.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks.
I think a few other things just to add on to that is that YouTube is your friend. Like, honestly, is whenever I want to see, hey, what else is new from Microsoft Office, or is there something available to do? Like, other teachers have done it, or there is demonstrations, and then you can go and look a little more specific. But I use it all the time. And we look at like Rewordify was one of the first things that we were really utilizing to adapt text to different levels for you, and you could adjust vocabulary and stuff, and each kid could have the same text adapted differently. But you know, one of the initial issues or problems that I had with that was looked at, well, everybody does Rewordify and that's all we do. And no, like, that's a tool, and when is it appropriate, when's it not, and how do we use it? But then, I mean, there's tons of things. It can be low tech, like, you know, just using if-then statements with a kid, or having check sheets for everybody so they can keep track of multi-step directions. There's an application through Microsoft, and it escapes me right now, but I use it sometimes, and I'm in a meeting, and it will basically, it's voice to text, but it'll pick up from the speaker and basically script their conversation for me. I don't always process things at the same speed, so I can be reading back through and see what I missed. So there's just a lot of things like that. I heard the Bookshare was mentioned, different communication devices, LAMP, GoTalk, PowerPoint, using PowerPoint for books, and like creating the lessons in a book form, and it will read to the kids, and it can be interactive. Yeah, it takes time, but other kids can benefit from it too. It can be part of your design. So there are a lot of things, you know, different communication apps just to help conversations start with kids. So I always say, use what's there. Look at YouTube, see what's being out there. Look in the Microsoft accessibility tools. Do a search there. They're always adding things, and Google has things and adds them too. So.
If I could add, Lori, I think one of the things I really appreciated, particularly with teachers, when I would see in their classroom, they would have multiple ways of a child to show what they knew, or if they got done, or things they like to do. So, you know, station, when they're younger, they have stations, and they go to stations, or if they got done their work, they could go pick to go do this, that, or the other thing. But I think what UDL does when that's built in, the different representations of what you know, or activities that you can choose to do based on your interests and the way that you learn, is that a student, and this is one of the things we've been really trying to have Anna learn, is self-advocacy, is then she can take ownership and learn what works for her. And then she can say, oh, that doesn't work for me. I like this one, or anything. And I think that's really the importance of all this, is if we give students the opportunity to try different things, and it's built into the classroom instead of added, because, oh no, we got this problem, what are we gonna do with this kid because they can't do this or they can't do that, versus if it's already set up thinking, oh, well, let's already have these different ways of expressing, and you know what, and we can add to this, or we can tweak it, whatever. But then students can learn there's more than one way to do something. And I think it allows for more creativity and for more learning. And I just think it brings camaraderie in a classroom and allows students to take ownership for their own advocacy, whether they have a disability or not. They, when they get on with life, they can say, like Todd said, I use this so I can read it, so he can read it back to me. If that's what he needs to support himself to, that processing. We all need different things. He knows that works for him. We want all children to learn that, not just kids with disabilities.
Well, Jill, what you're describing is like a lifelong skill, I guess, for people advocating for themselves. And, thanks for that. Thanks. I hear about a lot of apps, and we're talking about a lot of the tools that way. I think one of the things that I'm thinking of that we talk about but hasn't been talked about yet is maybe that even presuming competence of a student, and for maybe the adults in the room. And I wonder if you can speak about that a little bit, if anybody wants to start with that.
I will. Presuming competence is the foundation to all of this and any of this working. Is you have to first put everything aside that you might have thought before or anything, and focus on that. It has to start with not they can't do this, or how can we make this accessible? How can we engage the child? You have to believe that kids can learn, and that you're not deciding what they can or cannot learn and putting that limit on them. And that's, I'm going to tell you, is almost every special education teacher in the world wants to control it and wants to make sure that they want to do the best for that kid. And sometimes we lose the focus on, it might not be that we're focusing on the same task for a long period of time, and we're not having the other opportunity to learn other things because we didn't master something. We might not master something within our time in school. It might be later in life, it might not happen. But let's say the easiest example of times tables, like honest to God. So like, okay, so what? Somebody didn't memorize it. So, or they can't memorize it, but are they understanding the concept of that? Can they utilize a calculator? They can learn algebraic concepts. I have a group of kids that, like, I would say that people would say, oh, they can't be in algebra. They're in algebra. They're learning about coordinate planes and relations between points and slope intercept. Are we using all the same vocabulary for everything? No, we're narrowing that vocabulary, that scope, so they're understanding the concept. And that's what we have to think about. It might not be everything at the same level, but it's working towards the same standard. But it all starts with presuming competence. And that's with the parents, caseworkers, teachers. You cannot put those limits. And it's challenging because you also have to look at, as you're presuming competence, is you don't want to overwhelm someone. Presuming competence just doesn't mean, hey, coming into my class, hey, you can do everything everybody else does. That's not presuming competence.
Thanks, Todd. Anybody else?
I think there is a good article. I don't remember who it's written by, The Least Dangerous Assumption. It's a very beautiful article where, presuming competence is very important, because what could happen, the least the child could or could not do is, it's a very beautiful article. I'll have to just kind of dig it out. And
thanks, Anita. If you could do that, that would be great. That would be great. And I know, Nicole, I think you wanted to add something with that too. Am I right to say that?
Oh yeah, I guess, related to presuming competence, I think what we've seen too is with the best of intentions, sometimes people, and including myself, I have to watch myself, will jump in and not, maybe not presume competence because they're scared to let Abby fail. And so I think what we've seen, and we've seen it happen, and again, like, I have to check myself because I know she's competent, and sometimes I have to watch it. I don't try to prove it to other people too much and give her the opportunity. But just one specific example that where some technology in a tool could almost be used in a way where it kind of takes that the dignity of her to to try away from her the risk of failure. So we have an app that randomizes her classmates' names. So we put all our classmates in, and it kind of lets her pick on friends, choose friends. So there have been times, and it definitely has its place. If there's, can keep her engaged. But I guess what we had to be very careful about is that it then started being used as a way for Abby to just sit while other kids were learning. So I guess so the tool then was like, oh, other kids are learning, their pronouns, or other kids are learning math. This is, Abby's not really there. We don't want her, she can't really answer this, or we're afraid she might answer wrong. She's just going to call on other kids. So the expectation was sort of that other kids are learning, and Abby just sits and calls on other kids who are learning. She doesn't have a learning purpose. So I think that, again, like that could happen with the best of intentions, where you're trying to have her included. So by first glance it might appear that she's included, but she's not included in the actual learning. So the goal should be to learn. And so I think that we've seen that it goes back to presuming competence. So it goes back to presuming that Abby can learn, and the outcome, her final product, or her outcome when she walks away from that lesson, might look, a little bit different than some of the other kids. And I've seen it happen now. I've seen that, things again that I didn't actually even know as an adult about mealworms, like Abby can now tell me. So things that, she might not be able to tell you as much as some of the other kids in her class, but because she had a role, she had a learning objective, and we made sure she knew that she did walk away knowing more after that, those lessons were done than when before. And her role wasn't just to sit there and look like she's included. It was to actually be included in the learning. So again, and I think it goes, and again, just to be clear, I know I said this, but I don't think it's done with bad intentions. Like I think that it's the best of intentions, like not wanting anybody to feel awkward or left out, but we all have to just, take a step back and like let the student have the opportunity to sometimes, fail and have, maybe a safety net for them, but let them have that. And I think what I've seen come out of, like, one silver lining that we've seen from the last year, because I guess the virtual learning has let us as a team like really look at UDL. It's been sort of new for us in the last year, because when you took away a lot of the participation that happens in virtual learning, we're left with just actual content, curriculum, and learning. And we saw that we really needed to work on that. But I've seen Abby raises her hand, and it might seem very minor to other families, but I will tell you as her parent, it is not minor at all. So she knows an answer, and I don't tell her to raise her hand, because Abby has a one-on-one at school when she's there, and at home I'm sort of the one-on-one. And to see her know an answer, say an answer on her own, and raise her hand with that answer feels huge. So I think that, again, giving her the chance to sometimes say the wrong thing needs to happen. That helps.
Thanks, Nicole, for saying that. And I know what you were talking about this before is making that choice of whether being present or whether, to be included or to have real learning. And you talked about that before in this pre-planning. And we've all seen inclusion where somebody's just present and it's not really meaningful access. And I'm so glad that you talked about that, Nicole. I think we're just going to wrap up a little bit. Maybe if anybody had any last words to say before we go on to some of the resources that Tammy's going to convey to us. Anybody else has a few last words they wanted to say, but before the questions will be coming as well. Okay, I think we're good. Tammy, I'm going to introduce, I just wanted to say thank you, and I know we're going to have some questions after this. They're, getting them now. So for that active discussion, it's great. And I want to bring Tammy and Peel colleague, who's going to continue with some more information that will be helpful to participants on the call today. Thanks.
Thank you, Lori. I did put in the chat, I think, Anita, if I'm correct, the article that you might have been talking about is by Cheryl Jorgensen, and
Yes.
The least dangerous assumption, and there's 5 reasons for presuming competence. That's in the chat. That is a great resource. Also here we have, and I'm going to go over these pretty quickly because I like to get back to questions and answers as soon as possible for the panel. Beginning with this first resource, that's Essentialized Content. These are examples of how we can adjust the information to kind of touch upon different levels. So it begins with kind of the more complex, and then it has another layer that's a little simplified, and then it boils down to the basics. And these are essentialized content, but they are examples of what you can put into place. And I'm trying to word it. It's not curriculum and it's not a lesson plan, but just as Todd was saying, it's an entry point into the curriculum. So you can look at the essentialized examples, and they're organized by grade level, and it's mostly just math and English. And going all the way down here, just like the essentialized content, adapted literature, these are books that are reformatted using images. So it is the same cover of the book. It's the same basic concepts in the book. So if it's A Tale of Two Cities, you'll see pictures with just a few words. So an entire chapter can be on one page, and it just boils it down. And if you look at those, you'll see a whole list of adapted novels, and there's several different sites that offer that. These three, we have patent planning and implementing universally designed lessons. That's geared towards teachers, and the teacher's desk reference, universal design for learning, also for teachers. And then patent also has universal design for learning, what it means for you. And I think that these three are all downloads. So if you click on those links, you're able to download those resources and use them. The Standard Aligned System portal is a site that you navigate. You can begin by creating a register, and you create an account, and then you can go in and say that you have a child in 7th grade and you really want to know what they're learning across the board in English. And you will click on that, and it'll have the standards, it'll have the number of the standard, it'll have different interventions, and again, the essentialized content, or the standards aligned content. The end all be all is the UDL guidelines. If you go to no other resource on here, go to the UDL guidelines. This is probably the most valuable resource on this list, and it is comprehensive. It really demonstrates how to do universal design for learning, and it presents the information in a universally designed format. So you can access the information that you need on a variety of different levels, and there are countless ideas. And all of these resources are available at the Peel website and at the Pennsylvania Center for Exceptional Children's website as well.
We had a couple questions in the Q&A section regarding assistive technology and assistive technology resources, the role of assistive technology experts in planning, utilizing AT. I was wondering if the panelists could maybe speak to that just a little bit.
I'll start, is the best access for resources is, in my opinion, is utilizing your intermediate unit. That's what I do. Is I have a couple of consultants that's their AT experts, and I utilize them. We have a formal process, and they do a assessment and recommendations, and then we reconvene a team and we trial things, and that's our starting point. When it comes to communication, we also utilize our speech teachers without speech and language professionals, without even going into having an AT eval, if they have the expertise to do that. So that's really our starting point. I have reached out to other IUs. I am going to say is I've also had an opportunity to work with Scott Doherty, which used to work with Patton, and I believe he's with the Allegheny Intermediate Unit now, and I just see him as a genius. So he's someone that I reach out to too if I need additional information. I've seen him, like, assistive technology can be high, low, but when it comes to that communication devices, those can be higher, low tech too. But I say turn to your IUs, turn to the assistive technology expert.
I guess I would agree, and I would say we've also taken advantage of lending libraries. So I guess depending on what role you are, for families, there's a statewide free lending library that we have used it's offered. It's housed through Temple's Institute of Disabilities, but they will mail you things to trial. They have you can go online and look through their lending library. For professionals, I know Patton has a lending library, and our district has just started to borrow some things from them to just try. So it's sort of an easy way to get some help, to say this is what I'm looking for, and to a cost-effective way to figure out if that fits what you're looking for. So lending libraries are offered through Patton, through the Institute of Disabilities at Temple, and I think our IU in the county I live in, our IU also has a lending library. So I don't know if all IUs also have that. So that's another resource if you're just trying to figure stuff out. Because I know as a parent, it can, it does get expensive when you buy something and it works sort of, but not exactly what you're looking for. So that would be a good place to start, sort of risk-free, I think.
I will say too, as a school district, is if there's a need for a communication device in some way, I feel that for me that falls back on the school. So that's our obligation to help find that right fit and provide that. And then as the kids are moving into post high school or post secondary and exiting school age, is getting connected with resources that can provide that through insurances.
I guess I would like to say, just generally speaking, is when this is the importance of presuming competence, and when trialing devices, that just because one did not work, then don't not try another one, or say they can't learn that, or it needs to be trialed with fidelity. So I just would like to say that as a parent perspective, that those points are important.
We've always, like since the last few years, used, like Todd said, reached out to the IU, and we do the set framework, and we get together as a team and try to see what are the tools in each environment which would benefit not only Ishan, but when Ishan uses it, a lot of other kids, they come up with think, oh, I see how he could or she could use that. Like he used to struggle with reading. He had like the prescription at home where he would not know how to take his own medicine, and he had an AI app which he found very fascinating, and he would just put it on the prescription bottle and it would read out to him. So he started doing that, and many kids in his class actually did that, and it was like, fun initially, but sometimes, to read quick lines. So things like that, small things you don't think kids want to, do it themselves, or they are very tech savvy. I mean, it's amazing what they can do, which we wouldn't even know.
Anything else? Is there anything else? Any more questions, Brooke?
I think we've hit on most of them.
Okay. I think we just wanted to make sure we have the tips and tricks here, for building successful inclusive classrooms. These are things really to keep in mind. And some of the things that we talked about today was, that key of presuming competence, and collaboration is key, even though sometimes we don't often see eye to eye sometimes. I mean, sometimes that could be a barrier, but we always feel that everybody brings things to the table. And having really that we can do this attitude, I think that was talked about. It sounds like that's something that people are doing. We can do this. And really remember the big picture and the goal that's in mind. What's the goal? Identifying barriers and maybe making sure that those barriers can be overcome. And there's different ways to do that. And design options to overcome barriers that can benefit all students. And we've heard a lot about that today. And of course, offering materials in the different formats and videos and virtual teaching and engaging activities and printed, all different. I mean, the sky's the limit because our learners are very diverse, all learners. And utilize the resources and really share what you've learned with other families, with teachers, administrators, so that they can be on board also. And I just want to take this time to, if people, the participants on this webinar, can take something back to their school, to the team, to their family, thinking about their student, what is one thing that you can take back that maybe you can implement, or where you can go? I wanted to really thank Jill and Nicole, Anita, and Todd for all their insights and their experiences. I mean, this is just the beginning of this panel, I have to say, and we just want to thank you so much for all that you've provided today. I think that if there's anything else, I think the last one is really a thank you and some information if anybody needs more information. Info at Peel Center, and then our phone number. And there's also, we have a youth center as well that can answer questions. That would be great. Of course, the PACEC website, and Families to the Max. If you have any questions, if you want more information, you can email us at that address, and look for this webinar that will be, that's being recorded on the PACEC website as well as the Peel Center website. A big thank you to everybody.